So we're sharing a lavalier mic. Hopefully this works. Good. All right. Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to kind of walk us through where we've been and where we're headed, and the good news of some of that. So let me just get myself settled here. And we need to turn on the clicker. Yep, I have one just like this, Regina. So as you can tell, Regina makes sure the train runs on time, and I have been privileged to chair this effort. So in front of you is a document that summarizes the work of this regional economic development planning process, gives some context to where the RDA and the partnership and others fit. That is a takeaway piece for you, and my intent here in the next 30 minutes or so is to walk us through where we've been with this. We think of this region in terms of essentially a radius of about 50 miles. There have been reasons, including the Regional City Initiative that the RDA was created to respond to, that required us to define that region more precisely for the purpose of the state, the IEDC's decision-making and grant awarding. So that RDA region has been defined by Marshall County, St. Joseph County, and Elkhart County. However, the partnership has had a relationship with Southwest Michigan and some of the LEDO organizations in Southwest Michigan. MACOG is represented, has Kosciuszko County included in its collaboration and work. And we've decided to have an open-armed approach to how we define the region. There are times that it will make sense for Warsaw, Kosciuszko, St. Joe Benton Harbor to be part of an effort, and there will be times where it would make sense for Kosciuszko County to be aligned with the Northeast Indiana RDA and that effort. We welcome the involvement of as many as choose to be involved. But this gives you a little graphic of essentially how we are thinking about the effort. Marshall County, Elkhart County, St. Joe County, and then those complementary communities as well. Let me just walk you through, and it's probably easier for you to see this in this brochure than it is on this slide. Really, this effort began, or there has been momentum in a particular direction well before 2011, but as we put a timeline together, in 2011, the local economic development organizations created the partnership. And at that time it was called the Michiana Partnership. And in 2013, they hired Regina to begin staffing and resourcing the efforts and collaborative work of the LEDOs. Then in 2014, quite a number of us that are represented in this room were invited to an exploratory conversation that the partnership that Regina convened and hosted at the Gillespie Center, where the state of Indiana and the IEDC, Eric Doden at the time, was doing a bit of a circuit tour to introduce this possible legislation around the regional cities opportunity. As that legislation made its way through the legislative process, a group of us decided that we would ante into an effort to compete for one of those regional city grants. Marshall County Community Foundation, St. Joseph County Community Foundation, the University of Notre Dame, IUSB, and others invested in the preparation of that grant application. It cost a couple $100,000 to prepare that application with really an anticipation that at least we would put our best foot forward as a region. Thankfully, in 2015 then, we were invited down to make our presentation to the IEDC Selection Committee, and we then learned a few months later that this region was one of 3 regions that was awarded $42 million, and that required the establishment of the Regional Development Authority. At the same time, you've got the partnership being governed by the local economic development organizations, and you got the RDA doing its regional city thing. And one of the questions that we had to ask ourselves was, is the RDA's role to administer this regional city grant and then disband? And that was one viable possibility. We decided together, and it wasn't just the 5 members of the RDA, there was a bit larger stakeholder group. Many of you are part of that larger stakeholder group, which is why you were on this invitation list, that the Regional City Award and opportunity was a first step. It was a first win in bringing this region together to begin behaving in complementary manner in a way that perhaps we haven't always. And that the concept here is there will certainly be things that Mishawaka needs to do in Mishawaka's best interest, and Plymouth and the universities and Holy Cross and Bethel College and Goshen College and Ivy Tech. They need to have their own mission, their own vision, their own purpose, and their own plan and agenda. But there are things that we should be doing that are complementary and that the whole can be greater than the parts. And my best example is, do we not all benefit when we need to make our way to Indianapolis by the fact that US 31 is a more efficient trip? And it is by virtue of the US 31 coalition that was created long before some of us arrived on the scene, that began to advocate on behalf of this region to do something about improving the trip, if nothing else, through Kokomo. And I got to tell you, when I'm doing 70 miles an hour on that roundabout around Kokomo and I don't have to stop at the Penguin Point stoplight and the Arby's stoplight, I don't even know who was involved in that process, but I call them blessed, because it takes me 2 hours and 20 minutes to get to Indianapolis, not 3 hours and 20 minutes as a result of that. That's our vision. That would be a good example of the vision that we have for how this regional collaborative can come together and bring folks together to work. The other thing that we know is that there are folks in the K-12 education sector, there are folks in the chamber sector, there are folks in the Convention and Visitor Bureau sector, there are folks in the higher ed sector. They're doing their thing, but we haven't had a forum or the architecture to allow that to be commonly shared and for there to be an opportunity for a conversation around, hey, we could add this value and you add that value, and together those two values will equal 3, not 2. So that's our vision for this. We began in 2015. I guess I'll go back to this timeline here. In 2015, after we were awarded the Regional City Award, I was asked to chair, and John Affleck Graves and I co-chaired what I now call as a blue ribbon group. Carl King, I call Blessed as well. Carl, if you know Carl, Carl's kind of a data junkie. But Carl led that group, and that group is identified in the material you have in front of you. It's not identified in the material in front of you. There it is, it's on the screen here. That group was an initial group that we recruited to do essentially what I would describe as an environmental scan. And what we did is we went and looked at like communities in the Great Lakes Midwestern region. So we didn't say, why is San Francisco so much more successful? Why is Naples, Florida? You cannot replicate Naples, Florida, because that's where extremely wealthy people from around the world locate. So housing values and median family income and those kinds of things are almost irreplicable. However, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Ann Arbor, and Wichita Falls, Kansas, and Toledo, Ohio, and other places that were performing in various ways at a higher level than us. Why are some of those communities growing in population? Why do they have higher education attainment levels? Why do they have larger per capita personal income? And we began to examine that. That group identified 5 factors, having examined our aspirational peer group of Great Lakes, Midwestern Great Lakes, mid-sized communities that were growing, that were thriving, that had higher per capita personal income. And we decided that per capita personal income was probably the key indicator as it related to the vibrancy of a particular population group. And then we began to ask ourselves, all right, what are the contributing factors to per capita personal income growth? And we said talent, attraction, and retention, diversity and inclusion, making a community a place where people from different walks of life feel comfortable and welcome, creating this place where people start stuff and take risk, and we call that the startup group or the entrepreneurial ecosystem group. where existing businesses have the opportunity to grow and thrive and access the workforces that they need. And then, where am I missing? And that the next generation of our workforce, basically kids, but adults who need skilling up, have an opportunity to gain those resources, grow, and thrive as well. So that was the work of that committee. We finished that. We said these are the 5 factors we need to pay attention to, and we choose per capita personal income as the lag indicator to this. And then we recruited a different group of working teams who are listed in your material that we asked over the course of the last year to actually develop some sort of action agenda around each of those 5 themes. Okay? And the chairs of those committees, I'm going to ask to stand. So in the diversity inclusion space, Tracy Graham, I'm not sure that I saw Tracy. So Tracy has chaired the diversity and inclusion effort and is willing to continue to chair that. Amish Shaw and Jackie Barton and others have been actively involved in that effort. In our talent attraction and recruitment space, we have Megan Sullivan and Chuck Lehman. I didn't see Chuck here, but Megan, if you would stand. So Megan has agreed to chair that. Diana Lawson and Rob DeClean got it to this point, and then Megan and Chuck have agreed to take the baton further. In the space of our industry growth, we have Shelley Klug and Barclay Garrett, who have volunteered to take the baton from Jan Fye and Regina. And so Shelley, I know you're here, and Barclay, I saw you too, so if you two would stand. Thank you for your willingness to chair this effort as well. In the startup area, it's easier to say startup than entrepreneurial ecosystem space. We have Gary Neidig, and so Gary has agreed to chair that. Larry Garitoni gave that life and kind of assembled the team. But they have really been kind of the cart that was ahead of the horse. So a couple years ago, Elevate Ventures and the IEDC approached this region about making an investment here. We went ahead and started the startup board. They have a budget. They have an action agenda. They have been executing for the last couple of years where the other committees are ready to execute. Gary and his group are actually a little ahead of that timeline as well. I'm trying to think who in the education space, Terry Allison and Brian Wiebe. I know Brian's here. I haven't seen Chancellor Allison. But Brian Wiebe from Horizon Education Alliance and Chancellor Terry Allison have chaired that effort. And you can see in your materials the groups of folks that have been involved in each of those working committees. So when we think about per capita personal income, there was once a day that this region in the 70s had per capita personal income that was greater than the national average. I think its peak was about 107% of the national average based on my memory of the data that we examined. A few years ago, we were at low 80-some percent. Our vision is to return to a point in which the South Bend Elkhart region is at or above per capita personal income in this region. And the good news is the yellow line is the trend line, the green line is the aspirational line. And we hope by 2025, if we do the right things in these other 5 areas, that we will make progress in that direction. The jury's still out. The proof will be in our execution on this case. This gives you a little summary of the 5 factors, and in the center is this per capita personal income area. And then we challenged each of the committees, the task forces, if you will, to have their own lag measure. And if you're familiar with Covey and 4DX, the 4 dimensions of execution, you have to have a single North Star or a compass that tells you this is what we're really trying to affect. There are things that we might do that need to affect that, but we challenged each of the committees to come up with a lag measure that would be a contributor in the theory of change to per capita personal income growth. So these are the 5. So the workforce group has challenged themselves to raise the educational attainment level, which is one of the most correlated indicators or factors to per capita personal income. That should come as no surprise to you. This region is at 30% post-high school educational attainment. That is a welding certificate. That is a licensure as a nurse practitioner. That is a licensure as an electrician, but it's also a 2-year degree and a 4-year degree. Ann Arbor, Michigan, that we looked at, now they have a number of advantages. They're the state capital and they have the University of Michigan, but they're at 70% of their adult population has a bachelor's degree or higher. They also have per capita personal income is about 120% the national average. So we have a belief that if we can raise post-high school educational attainment, certificates, 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees, and advanced degrees from 30% to 50%, that this region will be transformed. Now, that's no small task, and some of that is complemented by talent recruitment, workforce development, so these are not independent silos, right? The other thing in this region that we realized is that we actually have a disproportionately advantaged density of higher education. So there are about 500,000 in our population. 41,000 of those 500,000 are college-enrolled students. We just need to keep more of those 41,000. That means that approximately 10 to 15,000 of our population are graduating from college this spring. We have to make sure that a greater number of those 15,000 graduates, or 10,000 graduates if you divide 41 by 4, stay, want to stay, have an opportunity to stay. So hence the talent recruitment and retention group, but it also is a contributing factor to the workforce development lag measure. If you look at the talent, this community, this region has grown in the last decade based on census tract, but that's because we've made more babies. We have lost migration patterns. So our kids don't come back as often as other communities. Now, not every kid should come back. But we want to become a region where people choose to come and want to come, and there's a greater number of people that are choosing to come here than the number of people that are choosing voluntarily to leave. So that's the challenge of the talent attraction and retention group. Both keep greater number of college graduates that are here and make this a place that is attractive for the DePauw graduate to come and for the Ohio State graduate to come and for the Western Michigan graduate to come and the University of Kentucky, for the for the Stanford graduate to come. Industry growth, we looked at, there are lots of industries. We want to grow by 20% the number of industries that are essentially high-pay traded industries. And what we mean by high-pay traded is that the average wage within the industry is higher than the national average, hence the per capita personal income direction, and it is an industry that trades in and out of the region. So I'm thrilled that we have Artisan and Cafe Navarre and The Vine and Yakida Pizza and O'Rourke's and all the restaurants in between. That's not the industry growth focus of this group. This group is to make sure that Chemcrest and AM General and Tire Rack and the various industries that actually produce goods and services that we sell outside of this region, because Beacon Health System and St. Joe Regional Medical Center are only as healthy as the size of, and success and economic viability. We don't have the need for Beacon Health System if nobody lives here. Make sense? So we don't want to see our health systems grow. We want to see our health systems grow as a result of having vibrant industries that trade, import, and export. So that's the focus of that industry growth group that Shelley and Barkley have agreed to chair. Gary's group, we've declared that we want to see 200 or 25 per year, so 25 per year through 2025, or 200, 8 times 25. 200 new, how do we describe them? High potential startups. And we have defined, that group has defined what a high potential startup means. And Gary's going to be at, Gary, which of the tables are you going to be at? So at the end of this little presentation, the chairs and members of the various working groups are going to then find themselves in the balloons indicate the 5 different work groups. So if you're interested in hearing from Gary how we've defined a high potential startup, and there is a sales revenue threshold, there's a number of employee threshold. So just because somebody gets a business identification and registers as a corporation, that does not qualify as a high potential startup. They have to gain some traction and have revenue and have customers and have some employees, and then we will count them as a startup. And we want to see as many of them be supported through the Idea Center, but we also recognize that we need to create those kinds of accelerators in Marshall County and Elkhart County, but certainly at the center of this, the University of Notre Dame has made a significant investment, as well as IUSB, in business incubation, and we want to leverage those and make those resources available to folks. Last but certainly not least, and inclusion, I actually say, I struggled with inclusion being its own thing. Now there needs to be a focus, there needs to be a group that's focused on that, but inclusion is important to the talent attraction and retention group, right? So one of my neighbors in my cul-de-sac happens to be Jewish, and my neighbor on the other side happens to be Sikh. I want to make sure that those families feel like this is their community too. And just because I'm a Western European, I'm also Native American, by the way, but most would call me Scottish, Protestant. Yeah, this is comfortable for me in the northern Midwest. I want to make sure that it's comfortable for Isaac Torres and for others that have chosen to immigrate here and build a successful future for their families as well. And so that group has decided that we want to be in the 80th percentile of income disparity, close the gap of income disparity between minorities and Caucasians. And we're not doing real well right now. Now, the interesting thing is we do a lot better than the state. This is the best region in the state to be a minority. But boy, we sure don't do well as compared to Seattle, Washington, and other communities where they are more inclusive. And we want to get after that work as well. All right, let me check, because I'm probably off script by a long way. This is the existing committee membership of the Workforce and Education Group, and I've given you a summary of that. Brian, you've got your work cut out for you getting us from 30 to 50. But the Lumina Foundation has a national goal of getting to 60%, and we want to tie to Lumina data so that we can actually track that data. We don't have to create that data. We use the same definition of educational attainment that Lumina does. And oh, by the way, Lumina is located in Indianapolis, and they're a major funder of educational initiatives. So it's no small mistake or coincidence that we would like to tie our goal to Lumina's goal. And we'd love to have Lumina join us in this effort in our region as well. They just don't know it yet because we haven't invited them. So their three goals to get there are a pathways system framework, increasing social capital to improve academic and life success for individuals across the region, and helping students overcome financial burdens to access to post-secondary success. Now, I will tell you a cute story. So we created these 5 committees all at the same time. We recruited the chairs and we got them going. The startup group, within 6 months, had a budget, they had a staff, and they were executing. The education folks, they read 3 books. They talked. They missed a deadline. We cajoled them. They finished their work, and they're ready to go too. But it was stereotypical. Those 2 groups were on totally different behavior patterns and totally different timelines. But we need those entrepreneur dudes and gals ready to quick start, and we need the folks that think carefully about major change to a system where we prepare kids for kindergarten and get them ready to read and send them off to middle school and then help them graduate from high school and access continuing education as well. Talent committee, so this is stereotypical, right? The entrepreneurship group, they got like 8 guys together and started doing stuff. And when I say guys, I mean guys and gals, okay? The talent group, these are all the extroverts that like stuff, like social stuff, and they go to the beer festivals, and so they got like 48 people involved. Right? I mean, literally, all the other committees could meet in a normal-sized conference room. They had to find a convention center to meet in, and everybody wanted to talk, and their meetings ran long, but they got to a point where they have their own goals, and they've declared them as places to be, telling our story, and people to know. And if you're interested, Rob and Diana, I'm sure you'll hang around the table as well with Megan, but they'll be at a table. And if you're interested in hearing a further explanation of places to be, telling our story, and people to know. Industry growth, again, Shelley Klug and Barkley have agreed to chair that, but Jan and Regina have guided this to this point. And this is essentially the local economic development organizations and other interested private employers that have developed this plan around them. And their plan involves connections and relationships between industries. So let's buy local to some extent, and let's make sure people understand what local vendors are available. Let's make sure that we advocate and clear the barriers and barricades for companies to grow so that they don't have to open a new plant somewhere else. And then let's make sure we have the infrastructure. So this is the South Shore double tracking, this is the airport, this is the kinds of things that come along with industrial zones and the like as well. I will tell you, I predict that in the center of this, there's some sort of advanced manufacturing institute. That I hope, my dream, is that it's a higher education consortium that has faculty participating, kind of like the IU School of Medicine, right, integrated with the University of Notre Dame campus, and the nanotechnology lab and some of those kinds of things where Ivy Tech and some of the other players are complementing each other. This region, I knew this, but I didn't know this, but when we started looking at the data, this region has the national, we are 3 times the national average in terms of manufacturing jobs. So where a normal region would have 15% or so manufacturing roles, this region has 40%. 40% of the jobs that we have are manufacturing. And by the time you take the nurses and the dentists and the school teachers and the firefighters and all the folks that support a region, I would say the majority of the actual traded jobs are in the manufacturing space. But you may not realize this, and I don't know how it all calculates. I think it calculates because we have so many manufacturing jobs, there are more robots in this region than any other region. Because we have 3 times the manufacturing. We should have 3 times the robots too, and we probably only have 1.5 times the robots, and we got to get farther along in that space. But we actually are an advanced manufacturing region, even though we have Amish folks that bring buggies and do really high quality work putting stuff together too, in kind of the old-fashioned way. Startup South Bend, I've mentioned here a few times. Their 3 themes are business acceleration, connecting entrepreneurs to each other, so they hold cocktail parties and whiskey tastings and things that bring hip, cool millennials. They've got neat ideas together. And then providing those hip, young millennials with high-risk appetites and great ideas and new, fresh thinking together with seasoned old grizzly people that will help guide them in their risk-taking and also give them access to capital that a 27-year-old tends to need access to implement their good ideas. Diversity and inclusion, this is the group involved. They actually have 5 different initiatives. I'm a little concerned that 5 is more than focused, but I trust them. And really, this is not a command and control effort. We think these are the 5 things. If you want to be involved, join us. And then we have to give them, that group, room to do their thing in the same way that we got to give the industry growth folks room to do their thing and the startup group. So you can read these: business ownership, visibility, leadership, networking and sponsorship, and welcoming. So how are we going to pull this off then becomes the question. And we're at that point. We've given a fair amount of thought. So the partnership, Regina and her staff, Sarah, they support the partnership's efforts in support of the Lidos. And the Lidos are the investors. They have funded the partnership to this point, along with Indiana Michigan Power and the airport and a few other private investors. Okay? But the Lidos are the governing board of the partnership. It is only by virtue of the Lidos' generosity that they have allowed Regina and Sarah to be in support of the RDA. So we have a contract with the RDA in terms of the partnership's administration of the Regional Cities Award, and we get to take a couple percentage of a kind of administrative fee for the grants that are awarded. So a few percent of $4.2 million has allowed us to contract with the partnership to support our work. But it's really the Lidos organization. And the RDA doesn't have staff. And this effort is not the RDA thing, and it's not the Lido thing, and it's not the higher ed thing, and it's not the chamber thing. So what we have determined, and for Jeff Ray and Mark Dobson and Barkley and Jerry Chavez and others that are the Lidos, Shelley Klug, Indiana Michigan Power, that own the partnership, we approached them as an RDA and said, we'll guide this planning effort, but let's essentially join our work together. We shouldn't have the RDA doing its thing and the partnership doing its thing. Let's do this together. And then let's open the doors and windows of this organization so that the chambers can be involved, and the convention and visitor bureaus, and the colleges and universities, and the K-12s, and the elected public officials can be involved in advancing this alliance. So we're calling this an alliance. It is not a new something. It is the existence of the startup, or the partnership, at the good favor and willingness of the Lidos to let other people in to the work of the partnership. So we're going to have an RDA appointee, we're going to have a community foundation appointee, we're going to have a chamber appointee, we're going to have somebody from Southwest Michigan that's appointed, we're going to have a county commissioner from Elkhart, we're going to have a city mayor from Marshall County. We don't know exactly who's going to be involved, but we have a framework for the expansion of the partnership. This is not something new. This is the expansion of the partnership to accomplish this regional plan. So the key stakeholders, the Lidos, the chambers, colleges and universities, local government, private industry, CVBs, community foundations, and the Regional Development Authority. Those are essentially the stakeholders that we want somebody, if not a couple somebodies, sitting around the table helping guide this effort. This is kind of what it looks like, but boy, it's a lot easier to see in your material than it is. It's on the back of this little takeaway. And if you kind of want to know what does the board look like, just somebody from each of these little pie sections becomes the governing board of this organization. What will it take? So to make this happen, and this is an uncertain question, this region has attempted some of these kinds of efforts, and people have asked me what's different about some of these other iterations. I believe this is different because there's 187 or 207 people in this room right now, and you have influence. And some of you have been actively involved, but some of you have been on the sidelines to this point. There's a reason that we have 5 tables with little balloons. If you have an interest in one of these areas that I've just described, go indicate a willingness to get involved and help advance this cause. So the chairs of each of these committees and members of the committees to this point will be present during the reception. And if you want to go volunteer your involvement, wander over, ask questions, introduce yourself. We have all your contact information because you registered for this. So all you got to do is sign your name. And then the chairs will find a place for you to be involved. Kevin, we would welcome your investment, right? And Chuck, we would welcome the Layton Foundation's investment. And the community foundations have all made a commitment. A few of the universities have made a commitment. The University of Notre Dame and the Community Foundation of Elkhart County have made seed commitments to provide leadership to this. And we intend to make this happen, but we'd like folks to join us. And we would invite you, if you represent an organization that cares about this region and economic development and some of these goals, to join us. And in case one of you is ready to jump up and raise your hand, there are actually commitment letters found in the center of the table. I think Regina was a little sheepish, so she hid them under the magazines. Our goal is to raise $1 million a year annually for the next 4 years. We're at about 350 or 400,000 of that million right now. And there are conversations we've scheduled that I know will get us to 700,000 or 800,000. We just don't know what the last couple $100,000 is going to come from. But we're going to do something with the first $800,000 a year that we know we will get committed, because we've had some of these preliminary. We just haven't kind of nailed down, is it going to be $50,000 a year or $25,000 a year from name the organization involved. We're going to begin executing. Each of the committees is going to get a couple $100,000 a year to begin executing on their aspect of the plan. And we have a handful of conversations that are open right now that we will have an answer to that could really accelerate this plan. And then we want you to tell people what you now know. So when somebody asks you about this forum that you attended and wonder, so I want you to take this little takeaway, and if you have people that you would like to be aware of this as well, do we have more of them? Hopefully we have boxes of them. Grab a handful of them and throw them on your coffee table at work. Or hand them to 2 of your colleagues that weren't able to be here. Or Linda, take some and hand them to your board. Hey, how many people you got on your board? 22 or something? Take them and share with all your board members what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish, and where Marshall County Community Foundation can fit into this. I don't know if this is going to work. I really don't. But this is important enough for this region that I think we have to keep trying. And that when regions come together, Raleigh-Durham, Dallas-Fort Worth, Minneapolis-St. Paul, Austin, Austin, Texas is not just Austin, Texas. There are a bunch of other complementary communities that are thriving because Austin, the general Austin area, is doing well. Well, we can't be. Why can't we be Austin? Right? Pittsburgh is going through a renaissance. Buffalo, New York is going through a renaissance. You don't have to have sand and sun to be a powerful place. A few years ago, 10 years ago, I examined the possibility of taking a position that I was offered in Minneapolis-St. Paul, and I had really never experienced Minneapolis-St. Paul. It's cold as hell there this time of year. I mean, the property values in Minneapolis-St. Paul are some of the highest property values, real estate values, like Seattle, Boston, Minneapolis-St. Paul. Who wants to live in Minneapolis-St. Paul? A few million people, I guess. And like 12 million mosquitoes. But we can't say, well, we're not Austin, Texas. Minneapolis-St. Paul ain't Austin, Texas either. Let's get after this and make this happen. And let's make this a place where my 5 kids want to raise my grandchildren. That's my self-enlightened interest, friends. This is not about this region. This is not about you. This is about my grandparenting. And your grandparenting. And your great-grandparenting and your parenting. Let's make this a region. Let's make our best effort at making this the kind of place that we choose to live, and that our children and our cousins and our grandchildren choose to live, because it's this hip, dynamic, thriving, economically vibrant place. So if you want to refer somebody, you want more detail, you want more information, the comprehensive plan that's like 87 pages deep with detailed action items and timelines and deadlines and budgets and all the rest of it, that's found at southbendelkhart.org. And then there's a backslash, and then it's probably plan or something like that. So if you go to the South Bend Elkhart Partnership website, you can find all the detail of the plan if you're interested in sharing it more broadly. That ends my little presentation. Thank you for your attendance. There's free cocktails here till about 6. and then we're going to turn the tab off, and if you want to go down to the bar at the other end of the hotel, that's on your own. But thank you for being here, and if you have an interest in being involved, please, please indicate to one of the chairs or committee members that you have that interest. Thank you for your time.